I want to talk about the different perspectives of different people from different African countries, right? And I think how, and also how, like, I think that's, it's so important that we actually exchange, you know, individuals, especially that are in social entrepreneurship. Not just, for me, it's all about social entrepreneurship, right? And the reason I'm saying this, I'll tell you about my experience when I was staying in Cape Town. So when I was staying in this in a student house. It's a commune, right? And there were different students of different nationalities. I think there was one from Ireland, one from Kenya. There was like three from Ethiopia, DRC, and of course us, South Africa. And I think that's it. Yes. Oh, and I think Malawi. There was one from Malawi. But I want to talk about the one from Ethiopia, right? So, but he was actually quite older than me. He was a senior student, busy doing his PhD. But I've always wanted to get a different, you know, I think it's in all of us to want to learn different things from different people, right? Especially those that don't come from where we come from. So then I would normally have conversations with him, and first it was really just the regular conversations, and then at some point, it started getting like serious, right? I would ask him like about, well, politics. We did touch into politics, but not that much, because honestly, I didn't really understand much about. I didn't know much about Ethiopian politics, right? I didn't know much about Ethiopian politics as much like how much he knew about South African politics, and that kind of made me embarrassed. But it's probably because I'm so focused on social entrepreneurship that sometimes I wouldn't say disregard politics, but I forget to pay attention to them, to it too, right? But then, so there was this one point when we had a conversation, and then he became very, I wouldn't say angry, but like he was, there was confusion and like a bit of anger, right, on his face. He was like, I don't understand why South Africans complain about that there isn't any jobs. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, hey, man, in Ethiopia, right, every morning, like almost every family, there's at least one person that, regardless of whether the family is rich or not, there's always one person in a family, within a household, that goes out into the town and actually and goes to the market and like sells. So maybe maybe the family, they sell coffee, or they make shoes, or they make some clothing, but there's something. And then he said like, but here the people here don't really do anything, right? And then one thing he also mentioned, he was like, you guys have no clue, like how fortunate you guys are because of how your country is in terms of its infrastructure, the media, and just really the beauty of it, right? But like he said, like he felt like most of us, it's like we don't see our blessings basically, right? And then I tried telling him that, but yes, I understand. Although, for example, from what I've learned is that like 90% of our economy is controlled by is owned by like, I think, is it 3% of the population, something like that. I know it's 90% indeed. It's owned. Let me just say it's owned by less than 5%. It's not more than 5%, right? And then he said, but yes, either way, like the thing is, we aren't doing anything about it. We're just talking. We're not maybe starting something, building things. There's only a few of you guys that do it, right? So that really, honestly speaking, that really made me quite humble. That humbled me so much because, yeah, I never saw it that way, right? And the more he told me about what's happening in Ethiopia, the more it opened my mind. So much so that I wanted to visit. I've always wanted to visit Ethiopia because of its history and just it as a country, right? But mostly, especially because of its history and how it overcame everything. So I don't know. I just feel like also it's important for South Africans to get a different perspective from other people of different nations. For example, I visited Namibia before, and as much as it was a short visit, I saw how much actually it doesn't level up with South Africa when it comes to economic comparisons. But what I'm trying to point out is that even there, like I realized how much. Well, I didn't realize it that much, but like I did realize how much we as a country actually are, as a nation, are actually quite fortunate, right? But I still feel like there's I don't know, economic inclusion. But again, even this term of economic inclusion, what does it mean? Like, does it mean that we're not included economically? I know there's systemic oppression, right? And like that's also a social problem, and that's what I'm talking about on this podcast, because I've realized that. Um, Let me actually talk about myself. I've realized that I've always been afraid to touch anything that talks about oppression or even racism, right? Because it's like it just messes the entire conversation. But then you would wonder, like, how do you expect progress, peace, and especially prosperity in the country if if the issues that are causing such things don't want to be talked about? So honestly, yeah, oppression, systemic oppression, especially, or financial, so systemic financial oppression, right? I remember once read an article about how, I think it was FNB, that it charges, there was some kind of like, there were more interest to black people, that like black people were charged more interest compared to, people of white people, and I think Indian people. I'm not so sure about Asian, but such issues should also be talked about. But again, I want to get back to the point of having people from different countries, or maybe, for example, having volunteers that go to a different, and I understand that the African Union tries this. In fact, there's a program that they have where they take students and young professionals, and then they exchange them, right, to go to different countries. If I'm from South Africa, I may be taken to Senegal, and then someone from Senegal is taken to maybe Botswana, someone from Botswana is taken to Kenya, all these different places, so that we can gain different perspectives, so that when we come back home, we can see how we can execute them into our status quo, right? And bring about change or solve problems that we didn't normally see with our, general eye. So I don't know, like, that's just what I'm thinking about right now. And I know there are so many, and I understand also that it's not so easy, right? There's honestly people that are really, really trying out there. There are organizations that are really trying out there. And it's hard because as you're building, right, or maybe as you're solving the problem, there's more problems that appear. I was having a conversation with my father, and then like we were passing by one of our villages, right? And then there's this huge pipe. The pipe used to be a plastic pipe. It's like a huge water pipe, right? It just comes out of the ground, and it's like a little loop. It's like a loop of a water pump, a water pipe. It comes out of the ground and then it goes back into the ground on, like maybe after like a meter or so. And then he said, this pump used to be plastic, but now they had to replace it and make it metal, because sometimes you'd find that people in communities, right, like in disadvantaged communities, we tend to just destroy, like, and I'm saying we because I'm from there too, right? And I know very well myself as a kid. When I was a kid, whenever you just see something there, you just want to, like, what's this, you want to vandalize it. I don't know for what, but it just, so it's like, as we're trying to solve problems, there's other problems that are being created, right? So it's always so difficult to see how can you actually solve all these problems. But for me, it's really one of my concerns, because it's not nice just living and being oblivious of all the problems that are happening around you or around your community. In fact, my mentor once said something, right? I was telling him about a friend of mine. So I went to university in Cape Town, and he was back at home, right? But he was at a university back at home. But like I kept telling my mentor, like, this guy keeps on asking me questions which I just happen to study and just search for myself on Google and research myself. And then he was like, yeah, but you understand that usually people in the townships, like, they have, how can I say, they can't, and not all of them, of course, right? But like he was pointing out that if you don't help your fellow people, sometimes at some point he might maybe be the person who you might meet at the corner in the street, who maybe decided to give up and maybe go into drugs. Next thing, he shoots you or he stabs you, because that's all he knew, or that's all he knows now. And that is so true. It happens a lot, right? I remember when I came back home. So there was a time when I took a break from school. I was just, honestly, I was just tired of failing because I was distracted by entering, well, since first year, because I was exposed to the internet. I just started entering a lot of competitions. I've always loved knowledge, right? So I would always enter a lot of competitions, and I would, entrepreneurial competitions, basically. So much so that I started getting distracted from my schoolwork and I would fail a lot. And so I had to take a break from school. And like I was saying, when I came back home, and then I remember I was walking in the middle of like the township. And as I was walking, I remember I came across one of our soccer coaches. He was my soccer coach back then. And the first thing he asked me was like, "Hey, what's up? Are you also back home now drinking alcohol and smoking drugs and doing drugs like other kids?" I was like, "No, no, no, definitely not. I'm back home. Yes, I took a break from school. Things got hard for me, but I'm definitely not doing that." So that's normally what happens to like your typical black kid in the suburb, and it's not necessarily only in the villages and the townships. Even in suburban areas, right? You'd find that these kids would drop out of school, or they would just give up on school. I wouldn't want to say give up on life. They would give up on education, and then of course they would then turn to drugs, alcohol, and sex, um, maybe pregnancy, not having the money to support the child, and all of these other things. I mean, it's a huge social issue, but again, as I was saying, and as this podcast is actually started to speak about my social entrepreneurship experience, but also just social enterprise experiences and social problems as a whole, I believe that these social problems can somehow be solved through some sort of course, entrepreneurial venture that gives some sort of profit in return, right? Because we all can't just, the it's been said many times that the model of um, the the non-profit model doesn't work because it depends too much on donations, and that can't happen forever. So yes, this is just my opinion. Yeah, well, not my opinion actually. This is some of it is actually experiences that I've been through, and I'm just sharing it here because sometimes I need to talk. And yeah.